And it's also like, oh, yes, we are recording this and we will, it may share it afterwards. So keep that in mind. Um, but given the kind of extreme nature of this moment in our public life, I think taking some time to hear from people who have dedicated their lives to actually exploring things that are real in the real world and have meaning for us is incredibly important. So to celebrate a scientist like Judy is a wonderful opportunity. Um, and I don't even want to try to summarize Judy's career because it's been very long. She was a longtime professor at Rutgers, author of many other books. Her work really has focused on the impact of pollutants on fish and crabs, as well as wetlands and invasive species, is very expansive. I can say for MRP, she's been a great supporter and advisor on our wetland restoration work and how we can advance it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Weiss. Please, we're gonna have opportunity for all the folks online to ask questions. So if you have questions as we're going, please put them in the chat. And of course, probably goes without saying, but for all of our questions, comments, we're just gonna try to keep it constructive and try to make room for everyone who wants to participate. So.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and see all these brave souls that actually came out in this weather when you could have been at home watching this on Zoom. So thank you for being here. As Jason said, I'm going to be talking about the contents of this book, and you have an opportunity to buy one if you are so interested after the talk. Okay, I'm going to talk about several types of different pollution in the talk. The book covers more. I'm not going through all the topics that are in the book. I'm just highlighting certain ones. And the first one I want to talk about is called eutrophication, which is excessive nutrients. Now, nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, are essential for all living things. But when there gets to be too much of this in the water, it becomes a problem. One of the major sources is human waste, sewage. I'm going to sit down. I can do this sitting down. We have sewage treatment plants throughout the city, and they treat the sewage, and then the treated sewage is released. The solid part is separated from the liquid part, and that's usually fine. But if there's a lot of rain, the rain goes into the same system, and when there's too much water coming through, the rain combined with the sewage, it's too much for the system to do. And then everything goes into the water body untreated. So this is called combined sewer overflow. And this diagram here, sort of showing what's happening. Normally you have coming from the houses, the drain that goes to the sewage treatment plant, and then it goes to all the treatment. But if you have a lot of rain, you've got a whole lot more water coming into the system, and it too much for the system to come when you've got all this extra water coming in from rainfall, and then a whole lot of it will go out into the water body untreated. That's what we call combined sewer overflow. And that happens when there's a lot of rain. The sewage treatment plants were built over 100 years ago, and the population then was in the city was a whole lot less than it is now. So it's a result of more people putting stuff in that we get combined sewer overflow. And that has that beautiful picture showing combined sewer overflow. You can go down to the river after a day after a rain, and this is the color of the water coming out of the pipes. So, I went, okay. Okay, that's not the only source. We have agricultural sources. We have fertilizers put on agricultural fields. We have livestock, cows and so forth, that also poop a lot. So we have manure. So that also can exceed the amount that sewage treatment plants can deal with. And a lot of this doesn't get to sewage treatment plants at all. It runs off. You've got agricultural fields. It rains. All this stuff winds up in creeks and works their way from little creeks into bigger creeks into the rivers and doesn't get treated at all. The idea is that it should all get absorbed into the croplands, but it doesn't always get all absorbed. So we have a lot of runoff that is coming in with the rainwater, not coming through a pipe, the way human sewage is coming out through a pipe. This is just running off fields into creeks, which then lead to streams, which lead to rivers, which leads to estuary, which leads to the ocean. So that's runoff. We also have atmospheric sources of nitrogen and phosphorus. It comes from burning fossil fuels. So this is going up into the atmosphere and then coming down in rainfall. So going to the atmosphere and then it's deposited on land and in the water. And we see, coming out into the air in these smokestacks. And then there's urban runoff. This is combination of lawn fertilizers and animal waste. And the problem in the city area, is that we don't have a whole lot of lawns and grass and parks to absorb into the soil. We have lots of impervious surfaces, sidewalks, roads, and so forth. So rooftops, etc. So with all this hard, impervious surface, a whole lot more stuff is going to run off that might otherwise get absorbed into soil. So the bottom line here is land use plays a major role in this kind of water pollution. Okay, so what does it do when it gets into the water, all this waste? Well, this is, I love this diagram. It sort of summarizes what goes on. We've got the runoff nutrients coming in, and we have the sewage effluent coming in into the water. And what does that do? It's nutrients. It stimulates algae to bloom in the water. These are single-cell type algae, not seaweeds, but single-cell algae, represented here by all these little dots. And that's an algae bloom. Sounds good. A lot of algae, a lot of food for the food chain. But this is too much. And this is a dense thing, and it doesn't stay, they die off. And you have the dead algae that then sink down to the bottom. And once on the bottom, they're decaying. And decay process uses up oxygen. So you end up with low oxygen in the bottom waters. And what does that do here? You've got various critters that are living on the bottom, crabs, whatever, stars, sea stars. And they may die. I mean, if the oxygen gets low enough, they need to breathe, and they need oxygen levels in the water that are reasonably high for them to be able to breathe. So they will die if the oxygen gets too low. And once they die, guess what? They decay also, which will use up even more oxygen. So it makes it worse. Those animals that can't escape We have some animals that might be able to get out and swim away, like fish and other things. So, decaying animals on the bottom makes the problem even worse. So low DO, we call DO, dissolved oxygen, low DO is a major problem. This is an example. The Gulf of Mexico every summer, every late summer, develops a zone of very low oxygen in the Gulf. And it's shown in red. And it varies different years how big it is. And they call this the dead zone because the oxygen is so low. And why is this happening in the Gulf of Mexico? The Mississippi River is coming into the Gulf of Mexico, carrying from all these tributary rivers that go into the Mississippi and then into the Gulf. This is the farming belt of the country. So this is carrying all of this farm waste into the Mississippi and out into the Gulf. And the size of this dead zone varies different years depending on how much rainfall there was in the year. If it's a fairly dry year, this will be smaller. A wetter year is more stuff coming down. And we have this dead zone where the DO, dissolved oxygen, is close to zero. And it happens late summer every year. Okay, so that's one problem of eutrophication, was low oxygen and all the problems it causes. A second one is that some of the algae that may be stimulated to grow release toxins, that is poisons, into the water. So these particular algae that we look at on the left side of this diagram, harmful algal blooms that are toxic. And there's a whole variety of these single-celled algae that are releasing different kinds of toxic chemicals. So this one is called diuretic shellfish poisoning, neurotoxic shellfish poisoning, paralytic shellfish poisoning. So the reason they're called such and such shellfish poisoning is that these particular species of algae are eaten by shellfish, which don't die from these toxins, but they store them. So that if you or some other animal eats the shellfish, oysters, clams, mussels that have accumulated the toxins from these particular type of algae, a person eating this could get very sick or in some case could die. So in areas where shellfish is collected for people to eat, they always monitor the levels of this. So, if you're collecting your own mussels or shellfish, you don't know. But if you're buying them at a store, those beds are monitored for these toxins, and you probably are not going to get sick from something that's been checked. These are called harmful algal blooms, or HAB, and sometimes called a red tide, but that's not really appropriate because some of them don't turn the water red. Some of them do. Some of them, they turn the water a different color. So better to call them harmful algal blooms than red tide. Okay, what can we do about this? That's the third part of each chapter, is what can we do about it? Well, the agricultural sources, there's all sorts of things farmers can do to reduce the runoff. There's certain ways of tilling the soil. There's something called strip cropping, terracing, contour. Here on the bottom thing, you see this, they've planted extra vegetation along the sides of the creek. So anything running off the farm field is going to be captured, trapped in the vegetation, and it won't get into the creek. So there are things that farmers can do that will greatly reduce what the runoff is going to do. That's called a buffer strip, what I just talked about on the bottom picture there. They could also reduce their use of fertilizer, recycle manure, do all these sorts of things. And they could also restore and create wetlands that will absorb a lot of this stuff. They can. They don't have to. This is all voluntary. And so it all depends on the goodwill of the farmers. And, you know, some don't care and they're not going to do it, and you can't make them do it. So this remains a big problem because it's dependent on the farmer to spend money to do this, and they are not required to. All voluntary. What about urban issues with sewage treatment plants? Well, we could improve sewage systems. The sewage system we have here in New York City was built over 100 years ago for a much smaller population than what we have now. And of course, improving this to make it accommodate the numbers of people we have in New York City now would be very expensive. It is possible to have third level treatment to reduce the nutrients in what's coming out. We could increase the number of the wetlands around. There's always many reasons to increase and restore wetlands. Reduce impervious areas, turn more sidewalk into grassy, soil, then turn it into pervious surfaces. So there's lots of things can be done, all of which cost money. Reduce erosion from construction sites, and also store stormwater. Stormwater is the big problem. We get a lot of rain. It causes everything to run off. Here's some examples of storing stormwater. We have what's called bioswales, where, instead of the paved area, we can create areas at the sides of roads into the sidewalk with vegetation, and soil will absorb the nutrients. There's green roofs that you can plant. The Javits Center if any of you visit the Javits Center downtown, they have the whole huge thing covered with a green roof, some orchards and vegetable gardens and wonderful things on the Javits Center. At the curb, rain gardens, even a rain barrel will store a lot of water. And then there's also this called porous pavements. It's not really good for roads with cars running over them, but it's certainly much more feasible for sidewalks with people walking on them, where the rain will filter through and get stored temporarily. There's also to build a huge storage tank underneath. And there's a place in Brooklyn that I visited that has this. I mean, you can't see it because it's underneath, but it's a huge area that's storing a lot of storm water. And then the storm water will, go out slowly rather than overwhelming the system. There's also things to do in the water that will help. If you grow seaweed in the water, that will remove nutrients, and it could also perhaps create a profit, if you can grow seaweed to make sushi or whatever. Also, shellfish like oysters and clams filter the water and help get rid of this stuff. And treatment wetlands. Wetlands can do a lot of good, absorbing the nutrients and so forth. And then there's oyster reefs. They're doing a whole lot in New York City, putting oysters all over the place, which will, if you get them live and functioning well, they will clean up a lot of the water. There's a wonderful demonstration with an aquarium with, really murky water, and then you put some oysters in it, and you see in an hour or two how much the water is cleared up. So shellfish can be very good. All right, looking at trends and the future for eutrophication, it's widespread, increasing in the US and worldwide. Progress that we see is due to sewage plant upgrades. Because government regulations can require this, but we cannot or have not at all legislated anyway from what's running off from agricultural fields. So what improvement is coming is upgrades of sewage treatment, but the runoff from farms has not been controlled. Harmful algal blooms have been increasing worldwide, and recovery time can be very long. So some good news, our waters around New York have become a lot better since the Clean Water Act of 1970. So this is over 50 years of regulating what's going into the water. And we have improved oxygen, which means that the fish called menhaden can live here, and menhaden are major food for whales. So we have whales in New York Harbor. That was first noticed about 2010, 2012. They first noticed whales. You can go whale watching from Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. There are whale watching boats. And, you could, the fact that whales came back to New York City is such amazing, wonderful, good news of a success story. Okay, next, plastic. So that's eutrophication. Next topic, plastic. Plastic is mostly made from fossil fuels. They make raw material into tiny pellets called nurdles, and it's sort of official is plastic pellets, but people call them nurdles or whatever. And these are then molded and made into all the plastic we have in our chairs, in our houses, everywhere. Plastic is everywhere, made from these tiny pellets that are the first things. And these little pellets often are spilled. They're shipped around the world in container ships, and there's spills. And, this is not monitored well enough. And there's lots of spills of these pellets into the water. There was once a spill near Sri Lanka, which is an island near India. And they had these pellets 6 feet deep on the beaches of that country, which is kind of horrifying. And then those pellets that didn't spill into the ocean arrive at a factory that will turn them into everything that surrounds us. And then all of the plastic that we live with and in our houses, in our clothing, synthetic clothing is plastic, ends up as pollution in the fresh water, in the ocean, in all our waterways. Plastic doesn't biodegrade, it stays around forever. So, and we have more and more plastic being manufactured all the time. And here's just some kinds of things that ends up in the water on beaches and so forth. We've got plastic bottles, some of which might get recycled and most of which don't. We have foam, which has been banned some places, but it's very light and it flows away very easily. We have plastic bags. A lot of times they find dead turtles that have swallowed plastic bags, and they think maybe, this picture in the upper left, that a floating plastic bag for a turtle could resemble a jellyfish that they eat. And that may be a reason that sea turtles often eat jellyfish. These thin plastic bags gradually break up into smaller and smaller pieces. Plastic is full of toxic chemicals. And that's something that a lot of people are not aware of. And when they break up, it's releasing these toxic chemicals. All right, here we said about the turtle. Straws, the whole fuss about straws. They're thrown out after being used once. It is possible to get paper straws like we used to have in the old days when I was a kid, and to make strong paper straws that don't fall apart. So there's some straws. We have balloons that, see celebration, you sometimes release a whole bunch of balloons. If you do that here, they're all going to end up in the ocean. If you do it in Kansas, they'll come down somewhere in the middle Atlantic states. But any balloon releases here are going to end up falling down in the ocean. They are eaten by animals and can block the digestive tract, causing the animals to starve. And then the cigarette butts, don't think of that as plastic, but the filter is plastic. And this is the most common form of pollution worldwide, is cigarette filters. And they are people, they don't allow people to smoke in office buildings anymore. So people go downstairs, go outside to smoke, and then the butt gets dropped on the sidewalk, and then it rains and it goes out, and so it's ending up in the water. And these are not only got the problem of plastic, but the filter of the cigarette has all the toxic chemicals from the tobacco, so that you're not inhaling all this toxic stuff. It's caught in the filter, and the filter is persistent, is plastic, and is a serious issue for marine life. And then there's what we call microplastics, which have only been known about for a couple of decades. And this is defined as particles smaller than 5 millimeters. Going down from 5 millimeters, you get to microscopic size, and even smaller than that, they have what's called nanoplastics that are less than 1 micron in size. So these microplastics are derived from many sources. They're derived from the continued breakup of larger plastic particles. It's also a type of microplastic shaped like a thread, tiny thread, that we call microfibers. And these come off in large numbers from our clothing, our synthetic clothing. Put in the washing machine, gets tumbled around, microfibers are falling off by the millions. And then there's also, this is a type of spherical microplastic that's a sphere. And these are sometimes in personal care products. There was a law passed about 10 years ago in the US banning their use in certain kinds of personal care products. But these things are tiny and eaten, they're mistaken for food by all sorts of marine organisms and found in just about all marine organisms, found in people, found in the deepest ocean trenches, found in the highest mountains. Microplastics are all over the world, including in our bodies. There's some dispute about how many, because the techniques of counting them and to say there's, how many in a typical human brain, for example, the techniques are not totally agreed upon, and different kind of techniques of measuring them will come up with different numbers. but I don't particularly care if I have 1,000 particles or 20,000 particles in my brain. I don't want any of them there. So these are everywhere, microplastics. And being plastic, they have toxic chemicals in them. And when they're floating in the water, they are adsorbing onto their surfaces whatever toxic chemicals might be floating around in the water. So we have, toxic chemicals in them and toxic chemicals on the outside of them. And these are eaten and going through the food chain. So it's not just the plastic, it's the associated toxic chemicals with them. As I said, they're found everywhere, deepest trenches, remote mountaintops, in our organs. Toxic effects have been studied in a whole variety of animals. We don't have total proof that it's having harmful effects on people, but there certainly is increasing evidence that they are doing harm to us as well. Getting back to the laundry, a large percentage of the microplastics are microfibers coming off clothing in washing machines. They don't get trapped in the filters, and they're too light to be caught in traps. As the water goes into a sewage treatment plant, the sewage treatment plant will capture most of them into what's called sludge, the solid phase in the sewage treatment plant. But there's still billions going out daily. Here's just a look at microfibers. They found that front-loading machines release less than top loaders. So if you have a choice, if you have a laundry room in your basement and you have a choice of using a top loader or a front loader, use a front loader. If you have your own private washing machine and you need to get a new one, get a front loader rather than a top loader. And then once you've done the laundry and then you put them in a dryer, then the dryer is going around and releasing all the stuff, in more microfibers into the air. So clothing is a big source of microplastics. So here's what you can do. Use a front loader, use less detergent, use cold water. Don't use a fabric softener or a pre-wash cycle. And if you can, and of course this isn't really very practical for most urban dwellers, to dry on a clothesline. It's possible to have a clothesline inside your apartment too, but anyway. It's also possible to buy, costs about $150. You have your own washing machine, a filter to add to the washing machine to capture most of the microfibers. So again, top loader versus front loaders. Okay, another really major source of microplastics is tire wear particles. You notice over time your tires get thin. What happens to all that stuff? And you think of your tires as rubber, but it's a lot of plastic in the tires. And the tire, during the production of tires, during the use as you're driving the car or the bus is going or whatever, it's releasing microparticles onto the roads as it's being used. And then so you've got the stuff coming off the cars as it's going, and they're accumulating on the roads, on the side of the roads. And as then it rains and all this stuff will wash off into whatever water bodies. And it's particularly concerning because there's a chemical in tires, a unique chemical called 6-ppdq. I know the Q stands for quinone. I don't know what the other letters stand for. But this is a unique chemical that is particularly toxic to fish, especially salmon type fish, and it was responsible for, major deaths of coho salmon on the West Coast. What can we do about this? Well, the tire companies, I have not heard of the tire companies doing something. I have heard of the clothing manufacturers being concerned, trying to develop clothes that won't shed so much. I can't say the Firestone and the other tire makers are not doing anything, but I have not heard of them trying to reduce this problem. Another major source is paint. Paint chips into tiny little particles. The paint we're not using oil paint, except if you're an artist. Most of the paint on buildings, on structures, is a plastic type paint. And this is one of the leading sources that has not gotten as much attention as the clothing and the tires. And marine paint, where they have boat yards and they paint ships, any other thing near the water that's painted, buildings, houses, whatever. Another major source that has gotten much less attention. All right, what else? What are they doing, these microplastics? They're eaten by a lot of small organisms, plankton and larval fish, and it causes, behavioral changes and other changes that are harmful to them. And then there's all the contaminants, the toxic chemicals involved. So this chart is showing in red the chemicals that are inside the plastic particles that are part of the plastic. So all these things, phthalates, PBDE, bisphenol A, are all inside. That's part of the chemistry of the plastic. And then there's all what's in blue, which are the sorbents, that is, that come from the water and attaching to the outside of the plastic. So you see here, this is stuff that was a water pollutant that is now glomming on to the plastic particle. So PAHs, that's oil-derived type chemicals. Lead, nickel, these PBD, polybrominated diphenyl ethers here, both inside and outside the particle. Bisphenol A, BPA, is one of the chemical ingredients. It's shown in red. PCBs is one of the chemicals from the water that gets absorbed onto it, and so forth. So you've got, they call it a cocktail of contaminants. Some on the inside, some on the outside, and some both on the inside and on the outside. And the phthalates and bisphenol A are potent, the kinds of chemicals called endocrine disruptors, a type of chemical that really was not known until maybe 30 years ago. We know our endocrine system is controlling our bodies, really, thyroid gland, pituitary gland, all of these kinds of glands. And these chemicals mess up these endocrine system. So the endocrine disruption is something that can happen at very low levels. So it's something that is more concerning, perhaps, than many other chemicals that are toxic. So here's a human body. We are, subjected to microplastics from our food, cosmetics, dust, medicine, clothes. So here we are. We're getting them in our food, in the air, and through our skin. We're getting them, and then we have all of these potential health effects. And I think one of the most concerning type health effects is the endocrine disruption, which is a relatively new kind of thing in terms of study and concern about it. What you can do, try to use as little plastic as possible. It's impossible these days to avoid plastic, but do the best you can. I mean, you can buy drinks in cans, aluminum cans, rather than in a plastic bottle. I mean, so there are things you can do. Bring your own bags to go grocery shopping. Don't take plastic bags from the supermarket. Bring your own. Carry your own metal water bottle around instead of, buying plastic bottles. You can wear natural fabrics rather than synthetics. Put a filter on your washing machine. If you're ordering takeout, tell them you don't want the plastic straw and you don't want the utensils you're having takeout. You have your own metal forks and spoons. You don't need a plastic bag that's wrapped that has a plastic fork and spoon and knife, etc. And get involved in policy. There have been attempts at legislation about plastics, and it has not, it has not been successful in New York, but there are some states that it has been successful. We have a plastic bag ban here in New York State, but it's not being enforced. There are whole entire neighborhoods that all the supermarkets are still giving out plastic bags. The polystyrene is widely banned. And then there's beach cleanups. A lot of civic-minded people go out on beach cleanups. So that's some things you can do. Third topic I'm going to talk about is climate change, warming. And there's 4 things I'm going to talk about here: coral bleaching, moving north, sex determination in turtles, and sea level rise.
And Judy, we won't cut you off, but we'll shoot for about 10 minutes. If that works for you.
Well, all right.
But you can run long.
I'll talk a little faster. Coral bleaching. The idea of a coral, by the way, coral has inside it tiny algae that photosynthesize. These are called zooxanthellae. And when the temperature gets too warm, they go. So this is showing what's called coral bleaching. It's got this color because of those little algae. Gets too hot, out go the algae, and the coral is pale white. And that's what's called bleaching. That doesn't mean the coral is going to die automatically. If these things come back soon enough, the coral will survive. And this is showing, a healthy coral. It then bleaches depending on how long the heat lasts. If it lasts too long, you got dead coral. But if it bleaches and it recovers, if the temperature goes down a little bit, you can get they can come back and the coral will survive. And again, here's just another diagram of healthy coral and bleached coral. So there have been repeated bleaching events in the Great Barrier Reef, the world's biggest coral reef, and it's had repeated. If it bleaches, 1 year and it doesn't bleach, it can come back. But if you have year after year after year of bleaching, you get dead coral and you lose your reef. A second thing that I don't consider a major worry here is that critters move north. We used to have lobsters in Raritan Bay and Long Island. We basically don't anymore. And they're in New England and they're moving into Canada. So things are range changes. And there's certain kinds of fish that we didn't used to have that lived further south that are now living in our area. So, it's altering food webs, but I don't consider this a major disaster. But one that is, I think, potentially a major disaster is with sea turtles. Sea turtles don't have XY chromosomes, determining the sex. The egg, see, the turtle egg becomes either male or female depending on the temperature. And the turtle lays its eggs, and here you see, the sea turtle goes up on the beach, digs a big hole, lays the eggs into it, and normally the eggs that are closer to the top, that are warmer because the sun is there, are female, and the ones that are cooler at the bottom become males. Now, as the temperature is warming, there are more and more eggs that turn into females and fewer that become males. So the warmer temperatures. So if you have nests that are becoming like 98% females, or 99% females, as this is happening, here we've got, in some places, you're getting 99% of the embryos becoming females. So we have a risk of there not being enough males around for females to breed with. There's no males, this is going to be a problem for sea turtle populations if there's not enough males. So this one is one to worry about. Another one to worry about here in New York and along the Atlantic coast is sea level rise. And sea level rise is a result of both melting glaciers that are adding more water into the ocean, plus the fact that water expands with the temperature. You don't have to melt any glaciers to have sea level rise. Water expands as it gets warmer. And this is showing the global mean level, sea level change going up to maybe 2010. It's still going the same way. It's perhaps accelerating, the chart showing the temperature and the sea level, and the year and the sea level rise. And then you're seeing here along the East Coast, particularly vulnerable areas. All right, we have cities that flood regularly now. It doesn't have to rain. We have floods at normal high tides in a number of places. We also have beaches that wash away and have to be replenished. They're doing this in South Jersey every year, getting sand to put on the beaches. They're doing this in Montauk, east end of Long Island, every year. Very expensive, putting sand back on the beaches.
Where did they get
What's that?
Where did they get the sand from?
They get it from the ocean bottom. There'll be a limit to how much of this can be done. You put it there and then, it washes away. These are done for these beaches because it's tourism. It means money to these areas. If the beach is too narrow, you won't get so many tourists. So it becomes an economic thing. Then we have salt marshes, very dear to my heart. Salt marshes. A salt marsh gets covered at high tide and uncovered at low tide. That's what it's adapted to. As the sea level rises, you have the high marsh, a healthy marsh has a low marsh and a high marsh, different plants. The high marsh is not generally covered by water at every tidal cycle. It's up in the air, higher up in the marsh, is not adapted to being underwater, except for very brief periods of time. So what happens is, as the sea level rises, the high marsh is underwater a lot of the time, and the plants will die. And then you'll have a puddle. I mean, here we have a marsh with a large pool. That's not normal. That's because the sea level has come up here, killed the plants that are here. So we have these little puddles that keep expanding. And as you get all these different puddles expanding, pretty soon your marsh is gone. So this is, you know, death by 1,000 puddles or whatever. Can the marsh migrate inland? I mean, that's one option. If you can't elevate as high, move inland. Well, picture a marsh in a rural area, you'll have a forest or something, and the marsh can migrate into the forest, and people will say, oh my God, our forest is dying. But that means this room, the marsh is there instead. But in an urban area, you got roads, you know, you can't really go anywhere. So they need to elevate fast enough. And most of them are not able to keep up with sea level by acquiring more sediment on the top, which is what they need. It's ironic that the invasive plant Phragmites, which is out here, enables the marsh to rise up better. But for a variety of other reasons, people prefer not to have it there. So this is just showing how if you have undeveloped land behind the marsh, you know, with the lower sea level, you know, your marsh here in the forest, and if you have empty land, you know, the marsh will move inland and the forest, some of the forest will become marsh. And, you know, that's fine. But it's usually there's some development there, not good. That's Phragmites. What can you do? You can increase marsh elevation. And what they do is what's called thin layer deposition. You get stuff, sediment, and spray it up on top of the marsh. So the marsh, you know, you can decide how many inches you want. You're not going to get it smooth and even, but, you know, you spray this up there. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be pretty ugly for a while until the grass grows through. If you put, you know, 8 inches of mud on the top. But this is a remedy, spraying sediment, burying the existing grass. But if it will, then the grass will go through, or you can plant grass up at this upper level. And then you're going to have to do it again after X number of years. But I think this is what's going to have to be done. I think marsh restoration is going to, the future of marsh restoration will be this, getting more sediment on top. There's been other types of restoration, but this is what. And lastly, this is not about heating or sea level rise, is ocean acidification. This is not about temperature. This is about carbon dioxide, which is the major source of climate change. Not about the temperature. The carbon dioxide molecule dissolves in water. And as you get more and more of this, the water gets more acidic. This is a pH scale here showing pH is the lower the pH, the more acidic it is. The higher, 7 is neutral. So this is showing as the atmosphere gets more CO2, the ocean gets more CO2, and then you see the pH going down. The major problem with this is shell formation by mollusks and other invertebrate animals that have shells. And this is just showing, this is a pteropod. It's a planktonic snail, very tiny planktonic snail. And this is showing at a lower pH, more acidity, that the shell basically dissolves away. So many animals like corals and mollusks have calcium carbonate in their shells. And that's what gives the shells the strength. And this weakens when the water is more acidic. So it's basically eroding away shells, and it's juvenile animals making their shell in the first place that are the most affected. So I'm going to rush through this. What can you do? Inflate your drive less, inflate your tires, fly less, eat less meat, adjust your thermostat, do your wash in cold water, dry on the clothesline, go solar, buy energy saving appliances, LED light bulbs, and I'm done.
That was amazing. I think really incredible how much you can cover in 40 minutes or 45 minutes.
38 slides.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have two questions in the chat.
We're going to take a 10-minute break,
Okay.
and then we're going to do Q&A after that. In honor of Judy's presentations, we do not have any meat pastelitos. We did what we could to not have too much plastic. And if you're online and you need to take a break, just please make sure to come back by 11:10. And if you have, we're gonna, if you're online and you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We're gonna make sure to read them here and have them inform our conversation. And just a reminder, after that, we're gonna have a window of time for more structured feedback before we wrap today.